Welcome everybody to another Story of the Shot. It's been a while. I had a busy spring and summer, but we're back at it here, and I'm so pumped to have Tobias Yoder here with this. Like, dude, come on. This is how to come back to this show right here with this photo. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to mention Tobias and I wanted to share that this particular tornado did not cause any damage or injuries or deaths or anything like that, where it was just out in the grasslands and farm fields and stuff like that. Tobias, how's it going, man?
Thanks, man. Yeah, appreciate it, Ray. It's been going well. I'm glad to be on. It's been a minute since we've talked, so
it certainly has. It certainly
sure.
has. Yeah. I mean, what? There's nothing to even say. It's hard to say how incredible this photo is, and it's so in line with just from what I know what you do. You know, how? Let me first ask before we hear the story of the shot.
Yeah.
How long have you been trying to capture something like this?
A long time. I like this shot, capturing a bird with a tornado in the background
Yeah.
has definitely been like the longest running shot idea or project I've ever had. And
Okay.
so I like, but the thing is there was kind of different degrees of it. So it was like early 2020 was when I first had the thought of, okay, I want to try and photograph like a bird with a tornado. But then I didn't really know at all what I was doing for like a couple years. And so it wasn't really until like probably 2023 season and 2024 where I was like, I feel like I really knew what I was doing.
Okay. So I have a question
But
already.
yeah, it's been a long time coming.
Had you seen tornadoes in person yourself before you had this idea, or did you have an idea and then go out
No.
and see your first tornado?
Yeah, no, absolutely the latter.
Really?
You
So
really
how did you
don't
come up with
see-
that idea?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I'm the kind of person that like I am very into like nature and especially kind of like rare and unusual things in nature. And so, so tornadoes have always been something that was a little bit interesting. And at some point I came across like storm chasing YouTube videos basically.
Okay.
And in some of these videos I noticed, well, first I just thought it was amazing because for photography I love like really cool conditions, and
Yeah.
Tornadoes are pretty it kind of takes that to the extreme.
Kind of unique.
And I saw it in, yeah. And in some of the videos, there would actually be like a bird that would occasionally fly by. Like,
Okay.
So someone would be recording a tornado. They're not a bird photographer.
Yeah.
And then you'd see like a vulture or a blackbird or something would fly by. And so I started like taking note of every time I would see that in a video. And eventually I realized, you know what, if I just like do enough storm chasing, eventually I might have an opportunity to actually do it.
Yeah.
But from then to actually like succeeding, it was pretty a lot of failure, put it that way.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of-
I have to imagine. So
Um,
so yeah, take us through the story of capturing this shot, man.
yeah, for sure. So I guess there's kind of two sides to this. There's one is like the like day of and like this shot, like how did that storm chase go? But then there's also like all the years of backstory. So I kind of feel like I'll just say that like one in three or four
Okay.
or something. But if it's like a low end day, which is most of the days,
Gotcha.
then it's like I don't expect to see anything.
Yeah.
If it's like a really minor day. But
That makes sense.
the thing is, one thing is, there's a big difference also between like seeing a tornado and seeing a tornado that actually is photogenic at all. Because
right.
a lot of them are like totally rain wrapped and they almost look like nothing to the camera.
It's just a big dark area, right?
Yeah, it's just a big blob. Or
Yeah.
or it can be like, not a full funnel, just like
Yeah.
a little bit of kind of scuddy cloud and stuff.
Sure.
So that's honestly the bigger thing is like, okay, I've seen like, 16 or 17 tornadoes, but
Okay.
not that many of them have been like photogenic ones.
Gotcha.
So anyway.
Nice, man.
Yeah, but-
So let's jump into the first slide here.
Yeah. So, okay. So this here is basically, so the red X is where I was. And so this is the forecast for the day that I took that tornado photo, but a couple of days before.
Okay.
So this was, and so basically I wasn't expecting to chase that day is kind of what I'm showing here.
Yep.
I had chased out in West Texas the day before. It was a very, very low end day. And I decided I'm just going to hang out in Big Bend National Park the next day and just do some good old fashioned photography.
Yeah.
And because I looked at the forecast, and this is from the Storm Prediction Center, and so this is like kind of like just a very sort of basic, here's the chances of where a tornado might be. And so
Okay.
you can see that the only chance is like way
Yeah.
up north.
Yeah.
But then if we go to the next slide, well then the morning of when I checked the forecast, I saw, well, actually, it looks like in West Texas there
Yeah.
might be some potential. And the way that you think these things go is it's like in the late afternoon is when storms tend to fire. So I figured,
Yeah.
all right, I'll hike around Big Bend in the morning, and then come afternoon, I'll head a little bit north and just chase around West Texas.
Okay.
But then, and so did like a big hike out there in Big Bend and early in the morning. And I thought to myself, like, what if by the time I get back to when I have cell service, I look at the forecast and then it's like
Really good.
a better forecast a
Yeah.
little bit further north. And I thought, oh, surely I'm not going to regret like sitting here, enjoying the scenery for a little
Yeah.
bit, but I'll hurry back to the car. And then when I finally then found service again, then I saw this was the forecast that was
Wow.
updated. And you can see that the 5%
Yep.
means that there's, a higher chance of a tornado. And 5% is still not that high, but
Okay.
it's high enough to get me very interested. And so then I basically like booked it from West Texas all the way up to the panhandle of Texas up
Which
there.
is not
just as
a
fast as I
short
could.
distance.
No, that's the other thing with storm chasing is like it's almost never a short distance.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of long drives. But anyway, so I booked it up. I booked it up there basically fast as I could, and I thought I was gonna get there like a little bit too late, but I kept checking the models, and it was getting closer and closer. And then eventually,
Yeah.
I got there pretty much just in time,
Okay.
like right when storms were starting to fire.
How cool, man.
So yeah, we can go to the next one here. So this is like a satellite loop of the tornadoes firing off, and so you can kind of see where those clouds kind
Yeah.
of bellow up. Those
Yeah.
are thunderstorms, and so yeah, right where your mouse is right there.
Yep.
There's kind of that storm, and then there's the one just beneath it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like debating which storm do I go for? Do
Okay.
I go for the northern one or the southern one? And
Yeah.
because when you're storm chasing, there's all these decisions you have to make, and one of the big ones is like you have to commit to a storm.
Sure.
And so I was closer to the southern one, but the northern one was like looking a bit more robust, and so eventually I kind of took the risk of saying, all right, I'm going to go north and see what that storm does.
Okay.
So that was So then this is basically that same area, but this is the radar. So this is showing where the rain is. So you can see that storm up that starts off kind of near Happy, Texas.
Wow. Yeah.
That was the one that I decided to go for, and then the one further south you can see it kind of died out.
Yep.
And so that animation basically shows the track of the storm and kind of where it moved. So
Yeah.
these storms are moving quite a bit, but this is actually a pretty slow moving one, which is very useful for
That's
photography.
helpful, right?
But that's
yeah.
kind of right.
How often is that the case where you just can't even keep up with the thing? I'm sure that happens sometimes, right?
It totally does. Yeah, like especially that's one of the things that makes me not even really want to chase something is if I see the storm motions are predicted to be really fast, then it's almost like like basically you have to kind of get positioned ahead of the storm, and then the storm basically just passes you, and once it passes you, you're not going to catch up.
Yeah.
And sometimes
gotcha.
the
Yeah.
road net like and sometimes the road networks are really bad too.
Sure.
And so if the roads networks are bad, then the storm might just like go somewhere where you can't follow it.
You can't even get there in the first place. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is now basically I'm underneath that storm, and I'm looking at this before any tornadoes have happened. And so this storm happened to be going through like pretty scenic part of the panhandle.
It sure
here.
is. Yeah.
And,
Damn.
so it was kind of like I tend to like not take a lot of photos when I'm storm chasing because I'm kind of just like focused on getting into position. But this I was like, oh, that's a nice landscape to take here. So
When it's beautiful and dramatic, it's hard to pass, isn't it?
right, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like okay. So then now, this is after that storm has produced a tornado.
Okay.
So one thing that is kind of interesting about storm chasing that I didn't realize before getting into it was that these storms tend to have like a very repetitive sort of structure and anatomy to them. Like these storms they kind of follow a particular shape where you can kind of know, okay, the storms are usually going east to west, and you can know that if you're on the back side of the storm, then you're likely to get front lit tornadoes.
Oh.
If you're in front of it, you're going to get backlit tornadoes.
Got it. Yep.
So in this case, I decided like this is a slow moving storm, and so I'm going to try to be on the back side of it, on the west side of it, to try and get it to be front lit.
Yeah.
Because then you can kind of get like a white tornado, which can be cool. But I kind of misjudged my distance, and you can see this tornado is like it's a great tornado, but it's way too far away, and so you can't see much detail in it. So
Yeah,
then
definitely.
I figured like most of the storm chasers that were around me were kind of like, okay, they're gonna just stop and get out and look at the tornado. But I figured like, you know what, I am gonna basically take the risk of like trying to reposition here.
Okay.
So if we
So
go to
let me,
go to the next,
when you said
yeah, go ahead.
this one's too far, like so far away, roughly how far in an example like this?
That's probably like 10 or 11 miles or something
Okay.
like
Wow.
that.
Yeah. So that's a
So
decent distance. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so okay, so this is when I am kind of again repositioning. I'm still kind of behind the thing. Now this just a total snapshot, but it's cool to see like a tornado underneath a big storm like that.
Yeah.
Storm enthusiasts love to see like the structure of the storm with a tornado. It's kind of
Sure.
like the small in frame equivalent for
Yeah,
for
yeah.
tornado people, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Um,
you're also seeing like
but
the scale of it here too, right? How tiny that is compared to everything else above it, really.
right, yeah, yeah. It shows you how far that thing is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That too. Man, that's crazy.
yeah, so this basically shows like the yellow triangle there is roughly the triangle and the X are things I put onto the radar later.
Sure.
So the triangle roughly shows where the tornado is,
Okay.
and so often these storms have this little like appendage sticking out. And that's where the tornado is,
Oh,
and
okay.
so I'm where that X is, and
Yeah.
so if you imagine that this is near like late evening, kind of close to sunset,
Yeah.
you can imagine that where I am, that's like front lit, right? Because
Yep.
the sun is shining towards the tornado, and so I figured like, okay, you can go to the next one here.
Yeah.
I figured, okay, I'm going to try and basically take a bit of a gamble and reposition to try see if I can get in front of the storm if it produces another tornado,
Okay.
which is kind of a risky move because tornadoes like are very unpredictable and you never know how long they're going to last.
Yeah.
And so if I spend like the 15 minutes to go reposition and go for more of a backlit tornado or a side lit, then there's a good chance I'll get there and then it'll be done. But
Sure.
I figured, you know what, like I'm not going to get anything from this vantage point, so I'm just going to keep moving and try to kind of reposition myself to get in front of it, which only works because the storm is moving slowly. So that yellow line is kind of like where I'm imagining going.
Okay. At this point, with tornadoes you have seen, leading up to this, what's the longest you've had one, visibly in sight, roughly?
Yeah, so I've seen a few that were like there's one in particular I saw that was like very long track. It lasted for probably about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Which is that's
But
way
that's
on
the
the
long
long side.
end. Yeah.
That's way on the long end. If I like added up like the total amount of time that I've had tornadoes on the ground, even though I've seen like 15 or 16 or something like that, it's probably less than an hour of total
Gotcha.
tornadoes.
Yeah.
So that one 20-minute tornado like takes up
A big chunk.
a big
of
chunk
it.
of that, because
Sure.
I've seen other ones that last for like 60 seconds,
Yeah. Yep.
or less.
Yep.
But,
Gotcha. No, that's fascinating.
um,
So it's a big gamble, but I guess it makes sense, like you said, right? It's like you're not getting anything here with what you're after, so might as well
Yeah.
take the chance anyway, right? Because
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. So then this is when I'm like I've now repositioned, and so this is a bit more kind of backlit, a little bit
Yeah.
side lit,
Yep.
more. And at this point, I'm like, ooh, that's really nice. I
It's
really
showing
want a
real
bird
nice.
at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is like just a total snapshot out the car window. And this is when like up until this point during a storm chase, I'm basically just a normal storm chaser. The whole bird thing doesn't really come into play too much.
Yeah.
But now that there's a tornado on the ground, now it's like, okay, it's bird time.
Yeah.
I need to find something. And
I'm
like,
guessing
I
you
kind
don't
of-
care, right?
yeah. Oh no, I don't
Yeah.
care. I mean, if it was a Muscovy duck, I would care. But other than that, I'm okay. That's like
Yeah.
I don't like those. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I kind of like with storm chasing, it's and trying to photograph birds with it. It's kind of weird because there's a lot of planning that goes into it where it's kind of the shot that you have to really try at. But then when it comes down to the actual shoot, you have to be like really spontaneous
Totally.
and just kind of be very, very reactive to whatever you can find. And so at this point, I'm like basically kind of just looking for anywhere where I might get a bird. And the way that the panhandle is sort of laid out is like everybody has their little plots of land.
Yeah.
And so every plot of land over is a little bit different. And so
Okay.
eventually I just keep driving instead of getting out and just taking it in. I'm like, I'm going to keep looking.
Yeah.
And so then if we go to, okay. So this is now about the positioning where I was.
Gotcha.
So this is kind of more of a side lit
Yep.
view, but with the way the rain is illuminated, it's kind of a little bit more sort of backlit.
Yeah,
But that's
gotcha.
about where I was. Yeah. This
Nice.
is that same view, but now this is like Doppler radar, so you can see basically it shows the rotation. So
Oh, okay.
that's roughly where the
Okay.
tornado is.
Gotcha. So you can
Um,
pinpoint it a little bit more. Yeah.
so this is all of the tornadoes that I photographed in the 2024 season.
Nice.
And so, including some of the ones from that chase. And
Yeah.
so, most of these, like some of them are great tornadoes, but I never was able to get a bird with them,
Yeah.
or at least nothing good with a bird. And so that's kind of, it's always like I've kind of accepted at this point that I'm going to sacrifice trying to get the best landscape photo of a tornado because I'm going for a bird.
Yep.
And so basically, whenever I take these photos, they were all pretty much snapshots while I'm looking for a bird.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
And so it's just one of these things where on the one hand, I'm like, if I had like looked for a good foreground, I probably could have gotten a really nice landscape, but I'm kind of on a mission here. So I'm going to have to just accept that that might not, might not happen.
I was just going to say, now that you have achieved a bird photo, do you think you'll spend more time trying to just do the landscape stuff with the storms, or is it just going to be let's increase the quality or the variety of the birds with the tornado? Like what holds next for you?
Yeah. More the latter, I'd say, because I feel like I'm really like, even though my photography looks like landscape photography, I really am a bird photographer at heart.
Same
like,
here, man.
So I think I just can't help but always want there to be a bird, even if it's, small.
Yeah.
So I'll probably always still try and
get that to happen.
A bird if I can.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yep, definitely.
But yeah, so now we come to this photo here. And so at this point, I come upon this plot of land that is pretty much just grass.
Yeah.
And that's, for a storm chaser, that's a good foreground, because a lot of times there's like power poles and who knows what, because you have no control over where you are.
Yeah.
And so just anything that looks at all natural is good. And I hear birds singing around me. I hear like a meadowlark and I hear like some blackbirds.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that is like obvious for me to frame up. And so what I'm kind of thinking is, I'm going to wait for a flyby is what I thought was going to happen, because it's actually easier oftentimes to get a bird to fly by than it is to like find something on a perch. Because then if it's on a perch, now you have to worry about, is the perch any good?
Line it up.
Adds just more, right. But I see this meadowlark hop up onto this stick, and I'm like, okay, I have to get to position here. And it's one of those things where like, you almost want to rush, but if you rush, there's a chance that even though it's far away, there's a chance that could cause a problem. And so eventually I'm like, I get to a point where it's not the ideal composition, but there's like the bird kind of looking the other way and the tornado's over here. And I figure, okay, I'm going to take this shot as a safety shot, which is something that I normally don't like to do. I kind of try to avoid taking safety shots and just always go for the better thing. And if I miss it, oh well. But in this case, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a safety shot. Luckily, the bird stuck around for me to get into a better position.
So are you in the car or out of the car at that point?
No, I'm out of the car at this point.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like, there's a fence right in front of me, and I'm basically taking pictures through the fence.
Gotcha. Okay.
Through like a barbed wire thing.
Yep.
And so,
roughly how far are we still talking with this storm now? Is it still, 5-10 miles out? Is it closer now?
So the tornado is probably maybe 4 miles away or something like that.
Nice.
Which is a pretty comfortable distance. And actually, for what I want to do, it's actually a pretty ideal distance, because if you're too close and you're shooting, which I've been too close before, and you're shooting at like, 30 millimeters, your bird you're not going to get a bird really.
Correct. Yeah, you'd have to be on top of them. Correct. You want that compression, right?
Right. Yeah. So
what focal length did you shoot this at? Do you know?
I think it was like
200.
150.
Yeah.
Oh, 200. Okay.
200 mil. Yeah.
That's a little further than I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Which still isn't a ton.
So,
Yeah.
No, I mean it's not, but it is definitely on the longer end here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to talk about the composition here a little bit, because I think like the sort of like bird photographer kind of rule of thumb with composition is like, all right, get down low, get a foreground, put the bird on a third, put the tornado on a third, and like that would be kind of like the I think that's most bird photographers, that would be their immediate reaction is like, all right, gotta get down, I'm gonna drop down low, put the bird on a third, put the tornado on a third.
Yep.
Now the reason I didn't, so basically the options I have here compositionally is not that much, but it's basically like move the camera up and down, move the camera side to side.
Yeah.
And so at first, I guess I'll talk about like why did I center the tornado here rather than putting on a third?
Which is
and the reason,
great,
yeah, go
by
ahead.
the way. It's great. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, let me hear your reasoning, and then I'll
Yeah.
add any comments I have on it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear. Yeah, because I kind of so sometimes it can feel you look at a photo and it can feel like the bird is too small, and I find that when that happens, it's usually because the bird is trying to serve the role of like really balancing the photo more than it can. Like
Okay.
it doesn't have enough weight to sort of
Yeah.
balance it. And so if I put the bird on a third and the tornado on a third, the bird is so small
Yeah.
that it doesn't really balance, you know?
Yeah.
And so I find like if you compose around something that's not the bird and just kind of sort of compose around that and then you add the bird in as a smaller sort of accessory element,
Yep.
then the bird's not, it doesn't have to, it's not trying to like balance the whole thing out, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I do.
in
Yep.
this case, it kind of just felt like I'm going to compose around the tornado as more of a landscape. And then for that reason, then when the bird is very small, it doesn't feel like it's too small. It just feels like it's a little piece of the scene. And so
Did you have any
yeah, go ahead.
thoughts between what you wanted to be the main subject of this? Did you want the tornado to be the main subject? Did you want the bird? Did you want them to try and hold equal weight? Like before you even had the first opportunity, did you have a concept in mind regarding that?
Yeah, not exactly.
Okay.
I guess I always imagined that this would be a flyby.
Yeah.
And so
Gotcha.
I that was kind of like when I was thinking of like bird with a tornado, that was always sort of what I was imagining, just because it seemed like the most practical thing.
Yeah.
And so I never really imagined the bird being huge in the frame.
Sure.
And so really, like, I guess I didn't have a super specific composition or super specific idea of what I wanted the shot to look like. I just knew I was like, okay, I want a bird in a tornado and gonna try to just roll with that.
Well, I feel like the perch bird tells such a different story than a flyby. A flyby to me,
Yeah.
I think, is always going to have the feeling with a tornado in it of the bird escaping. Even if it's flying towards it, it doesn't matter, right? It's just going to have that feel
Right.
because like of what we all associate with a tornado. Crazy winds and like this impending doom and like the bird's trying to escape,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And this is not
Yeah.
that at all. This is the bird is just doing its thing. It's chilling on this perch. It's such a classic grassland bird too to have there. So like, you really did luck out with the species. I know you said you'd take anything, but
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Right.
come on, a meadowlark in this is so good. And then
Yeah,
to just add something back with what you were talking about with the centered composition. I think there's also something so visually pleasing about the way that the clouds sort of come down on an angle to that obvious center split there, that just divide the image up so wonderfully well with just the tornado alone, taking out the bird aspect of it, So I'm very much with you on that centered composition, because I think if you had that tornado off to the left side here too much, we'd have such a dominant diagonal line here, but we wouldn't have the same on that side. You know what I mean? And there's just something about it that's like, it's bringing me in on these angles to the funnel, dropping me down, and then you cannot miss that bird,
Yeah, well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That it's kind of those
Yep.
lines coming in like this sort of give it this symmetry, and then the bird's like the only thing that breaks the symmetry.
Correct.
And so
You
for
got
that
it.
reason, it kind of stands out a little bit.
Yeah, and those sticks being the only sticks there too, right? There's none anywhere else on
Right,
the left. It's just
yeah.
that little cluster right there. There's such symmetry that the bird being there, like you said it so perfectly, breaks it, which draws attention to it, which is exactly what we want, I think, with the bird photo. So yeah, dude, this is incredible, man.
Yeah, and it's a good. It's interesting what you said about like a lot of times with a tornado photo, if a bird was flying by, it would kind of have this very sort of chaotic feel to it.
Yeah.
And that was something that I found that I really like about this tornado photo in it more than a lot of my other ones is some tornado photos you look at and they just look like gnarly and kind of scary. Where this one was like
like
it's kind of more like light.
and
Yeah.
this,
Oh.
yeah, right. They're
Yeah.
like Yeah, they're
Right.
terrifying looking.
Whew.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Where that one is kind of like it was peaceful in a weird way.
for
Like
sure.
I look at this and I hear the sounds of the birds, I hear the wind rushing through the grass,
Yeah.
and it's kind of this lighter sort of feel to it. And so that's a good point that I think the bird being perched also helps kind of convey that. And
And
it was
slow
funny
it
that this
down,
bird,
right?
yeah,
There's like there's such a peacefulness to it, to that bird just sitting there and almost unaware of what's happening in the background in a way. You know what I mean? Just like sitting
yeah.
on a perch. You know, it's not hiding, it's not down in the grasses, it's up out in the open. Like that's pretty wild.
I know, and it was weird. Like the bird sat there for a long time. Like
Yeah.
it sat there for minutes, and I wondered if it was possibly looking at the tornado. I assume probably not. I doubt it cares.
Yeah.
But it was just weird. Like it had a bug in its mouth, and it just was sitting there. It didn't even eat it
Oh,
for a long
fascinating.
time.
Is it I wonder
So
if
I
it was
don't.
bringing it to
Yeah,
like nestlings? Is it the right time of year or
maybe.
no?
I mean, it was. This was June 2nd. So I'm
So,
not sure when it
yeah.
would be.
It's so odd for them to
But
hold food other than bringing it to
yeah,
young, right? Yeah.
yeah, it had to be something like that, I imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I guess one other thing on the composition there. So I did take some where I was like I got down lower
I was going to ask.
and
Yeah.
basically and had some bokeh.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea there would be like, okay, then you get the stick entirely against the sky,
Yeah.
rather than and also and then you'd blur out the background a little bit. But again, it kind of felt like if I got down low like that, then the bird would be the absolutely only thing in focus in the photo,
Yeah.
and which normally would be a good thing. But I kind of think that in this case, if you have nothing in focus, whatever is in focus kind of needs to like anchor the image, if you will.
Yes.
And so the bird being really small, again, it starts to feel like, oh, if only you got a little closer and the bird was a little bigger. But when you're up a little higher
Yep.
and you have some texture in the grasses, now it's a little bit more of like a kind of complete landscape type thing.
100%
To me,
get that. Yeah.
so anyway, yeah. So
Yeah.
that was anyway, that was kind of the thought there. But
Tobias, in all of the wider angle, more landscape, bird photography, or any wildlife photography I've done, one of the things I learned myself that I personally love, and I'm not saying this is the only way or the right way, but one of the things I love is when something in this where your subject is connects to the rest of the scene. And I think when you get that low perspective where it's just, all of this blurred and then a stick and then that, right? There's no visual connection between those things. Everything is on its own layer, right? But when you get up to this
yeah,
perspective, we see the stick going into the grass and then the slow
yes,
receding of that habitat and that field and the other vegetation that's out there that then connects to that storm, right? Like there's such a visual connection between that perch and everything else in the scene. And to me, I think
yeah,
that's what makes these wide shots work so much better versus that almost cutout look that you get when you just have subject in focus and nothing else. Even when it's wide and showing a lot, it just doesn't visually connect. And I think that's why
yes,
like landscape photographers have that challenge themselves, right? It's like you want to have all the pieces of just a landscape photo connect and draw you in and pull you into that scene. And I think it really holds true even when we're adding the wildlife into it.
absolutely. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that anyone who's like trying out like wide angle bird photography or just wide angle photography in general for the first time often has this thing where they think, okay, I'm gonna get close to I know this is true for me because
Yeah.
this was me when I was first trying was like you have like a stick and then a bird on it and then
Yes.
like a background back there
And it looks
and
cut out.
then there's no like mid ground and it
Yeah.
just looks like
Yep.
yeah, so that's a good point there. That in this case like that kind of very distant field that you don't see when you're low down is kind of a mid ground of sorts. That
Correct.
sort of
Yeah, totally.
connects it.
And
So yeah,
all of
that's
this and bonus that all of the other vegetation, everything in it is soft and not jarring and attention getting, right? It's all just like kind of mellow back there in a great way. So like, cause I could see if there was a bunch more like dead trees and snags and stuff sticking up there, you'd probably want to hide it. Cause it would just be like yanking your eye there too much. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 For sure.
Cool.
Yeah,
Got
yeah, I guess I was gonna just kind of say like kind of taking a little bit of a step back at this style of photography. Like I'm curious from your perspective as someone who's been doing bird photography for a really long time.
Yeah.
For me, the longer I've done photography, then the more kind of comfortable I've gotten going a long time without having success in getting a photo. Where like
Yeah.
early on, like if you don't get a shot every couple weeks, you're feeling like, oh man, I haven't gotten a
Yeah.
shot in a long time.
Yeah.
But then once you've done it for a long time, then you kind of feel like more comfortable
Yes.
just sort of taking risks and being like, I'm going on like a weekend trip here to storm chase. I probably won't see very much. I probably won't get many photos.
Yeah.
But like at this point, I'm kind of okay taking that risk. But yeah, I'd be curious if you've kind of had a similar
Oh,
feeling with your own photography.
entirely. And the interesting thing is for me, I've had that same exact feeling, that same progression. And, but add on to that, when I made this my full-time job, I have a chunk of the year that is so hyper focused and hyper fixated on targeted species and making sure I get my clients, the best results consistently over and over again. So like it's just such a hyper focused, has to be productive outings.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in my off season, like I am now, I go the complete opposite. Like I am happy to go out on a hike, either A, without a camera, or B, I'll bring the camera. And if we don't see anything, like does not matter at all. And it's just like, me and Emily now travel. We prioritize putting ourselves in beautiful locations of things we want to see. And then if the wildlife's there, we'll be opportunistic with it. And then if we have time, then I'll dig in and start targeting and working it a little bit more based on that. But to start out with, I have zero expectations. People are asking me all the time. They're like, oh, you're here. And I'm in Washington State right now. And I get a bunch of messages like, oh, what are your targets? I'm like, nothing, like just zero.
Yeah.
And I think people are kind of fascinated by that. But it's just because I want that freedom to just explore and not have that pressure and just, in other words, for me, enjoy it more,
Totally. And, something that I found funny was I feel like, so like when I'm say photographing a tornado like this, it's very like sort of very high energy, high stakes kind of like, whoa, this is pretty intense. I don't want to like screw it up here. And then I think it's had an effect on my photography where in contrast, when I'm doing more like, I guess, more normal photography, it kind of feels a little bit more chill. And I feel like I can be a little bit more sort of playful with it. And and to me, like you're saying, I feel like sometimes when you're not feeling so intense and focused on it, it almost isn't a bad thing for your creativity because you're kind of like, oh, when you don't feel like I'm going on this hike and I have to get a photo, and then you can kind of just be like, I'm just going to sort of, play around and see what happens. And it seems like it's not actually, sometimes that can yield more sort of creative
I think so.
approaches almost.
I think it also depends on what your goals are with photography, right? I just like you have really pushed into the more small in frame, scenic habitat stuff, right? So for me, the subject is almost like finding the subject is almost secondary. I'd rather find a beautiful place first and then work with whatever's there. If there happens to be something there. If not, that's fine. I'm already walking around and enjoying a beautiful place. But when there is something there, then I'm already in a stunning visual place. So it's kind of easy at that point to get a really beautiful small in frame shot because I've only put myself in these beautiful places when I'm out with the camera and hiking, and of course that yields less results consistently, but when it does work out, it's like, well, look where I am,
Right.
I can kind of do anything now and it looks great.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably very true that's more true for people who are shooting a style where you're not as concerned about the species, and you're more concerned about the scenery. Because if you're the kind of photographer that like wants to photograph kingfishers, you're probably not gonna just stumble into a great kingfisher portrait. It kind of just isn't gonna happen.
Yep.
So
and that's a big difference that's changed for me in the past few years. Is I used to target species and I really want to photograph this and so on and so forth. And now it's just like, let's just go see some amazing places and then we'll photograph whatever's there. And it's been yielding some really, really fun results, and just takes that pressure off as well.
It just makes it fun. Yeah,
It
okay.
does. So let's talk about the edit. Not a whole hell of a lot here.
Yeah.
But that's great. What were you thinking, and what were your goals with the edit on this one?
Yeah, so to me, I feel like the big one is okay, punch up the contrast a lot and the kind of dehaze and dodge and burn the tornado.
Yep.
Kind of cool it off as well. That just gives some color separation. And then a big one is softening up that horizon line. And also
Gotcha.
there's like some distractions like on like the left there that I just removed.
Yep.
So that's kind of I mean, there wasn't,
Yeah.
basically the thought was just like, all right, punch up the contrast, you soften up the distracting bits, and that's that. So not the lightest edit ever, but it's not,
It's nothing major at
you know,
all.
it's all there, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And the choice on the color shift of cooling off the tornado and the clouds above compared to everything else, I think is so key there. It just gives such a wonderful color contrast to those different elements there, and really helps to separate things in a wonderful way.
Yeah, that was a big one. And another something that was kind of interesting was actually, you know, just increasing like the dehaze on that naturally sort of
It makes it
brought out a bit more blue. So I think I did actually also adjust the temperature too, probably.
okay.
But just kind of making the separation between those two pieces for sure.
Tobias, thank you so very much for coming on the show and sharing this incredible photo. It's always a joy talking to you, man. I love your insightful mind, and I mean, this is an incredible, incredible shot. You got to be very, very proud of this. I hope so. You should be.
Well, thanks, Ray. I really appreciate it, and I definitely really enjoyed talking as well. I feel like you're one of the people who has been doing this longer than anyone and has had a lot of time to think about a lot of things, and so I always enjoy hearing your take on things.
Yeah, definitely. And we were talking just before we were recording, and hopefully we can actually meet up in person over the coming winter here when we're traveling around your area.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to.
All right. Thanks so much, man. Keep it up, dude.
All right. Yeah, thanks. You too.